Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has used his regular late-night address to warn that Russia is afraid of losing the war and would use more missiles and bombs against his country. He told Ukrainians to prepare for Russian forces to conduct even larger operations in the east. Survivors of the fighting in the south of Ukraine have told the BBC of harrowing journeys to escape and of civilians being targeted by Russian troops. Our correspondent Tom Bateman reports from the town of Zaporizhia, which is receiving displaced and wounded people.
In the siege of Mariupol, it is the elderly and disabled who feel most trapped in the line of fire. 8-year-old Valentina's just been evacuated further north. She is blind and was in her kitchen when a shell exploded.
It's a good thing that my children were home. They picked me up, carried me outside, and we left immediately. I don't know what happened to my house, if it burned down or anything. We don't have any communications. The calls are no longer going through.
A lifetime in Mariupol was stripped away in days. Valentina says she had to cook food in her fireplace while friends went to fetch water. Here they're bringing in the wounded from all over the south. Vasil was doing all he could to help his fellow villagers under fire, ferrying bread, sugar and medicines to the elderly. But Moscow's war reached him at the roadside, and he rages at President Putin.
We stopped. I saw a bullet hit my window. As I was jumping out of the car, I got blown up by a mine. We were just living like normal people. We didn't ask anyone to come here. We didn't want this. What kind of liberty is he on about? Because of him, I lost my leg. I lost everything.
In towns even further north of here, there are now calls to evacuate. Now, these people can feel some safety here for now, but it might not be for long. And they know how merciless the Russian assault is. Thousands more have fled the fighting. They arrive at the aid shelters with nothing but the trauma of war. Serhi's village was caught in the crossfire. He says the Russian soldiers forced him into his home, demanding vodka, stealing his money, his phone, even his shoes. He says one put a gun to his chest.
He cocked his weapon and pulled the trigger, but the weapon had a stoppage. Me and my wife were holding our hands together. We thought that's it for us, and we said our goodbyes with our eyes. But the round jammed. I picked up that bullet later and gave it to my godson as a memory of us managing to stay alive.
Serhi's patched up his car after it was hit.
Shelled from a helicopter.
He says he's sure he'll go back home soon. Ukrainians believe they've won the first phase of this war. As Russia pours troops into the east, they know the next one will be decisive. Tom Bateman, BBC News, Zaporizhia in southeast Ukraine.
The World Bank says it expects Ukraine's economy to shrink by 45% this year because of the war with Russia. The bank says enormous financial support is needed immediately to keep the government running and to support the population. It's already provided nearly $1 billion of help and is promising another $2 billion in the months ahead. Ukraine was a global supplier of crops, including sunflower oil and wheat, but its exports have now stopped, obviously. Let's talk to our correspondent Dan Johnson, who is in the west of Ukraine in Lviv. Dan, fill us in with what's been happening overnight, and also if there are going to be any more safe routes for civilians to escape the places where the Russians are still shelling.
Yes, we know there's been more loss of life in some of the cities in the east of Ukraine. As expected, the Russian shelling there intensified. And so this morning there is an announcement of more humanitarian corridors being set up, 9 safe routes that have apparently been agreed between Ukrainian and Russian officials for today. There were attempts yesterday to get people out. Extra trains were laid on from the east to the west of Ukraine to bring people out. But those journeys have been fraught with danger and complication. The ceasefires aren't always respected, attacks have continued, and we saw on Friday the attack on a railway station in Kramatorsk. The death toll from that incident has risen this morning to 57. There were more than 100 people treated in hospital. So that shows you the sorts of risks people are running when they try to leave. But there is another effort today to give people a safe route out of the cities in the east, with the expectation that the conflict will intensify around cities like Mariupol, like Kharkiv, and that's why people have been told to evacuate those areas as soon as possible.
Yeah. In terms of what is to come in the east of the country, what does President Zelensky say about what might unfold in the coming days and weeks?
He's told his people to be braced for a great battle in the east. I think he's aware that the pictures of him and leaders like Boris Johnson walking quite freely around the capital city, Kyiv, may have given the international community the impression that things had calmed down. Perhaps the war was over. I think he's aware that complacency could be dangerous at this point. He's just addressed the South Korean parliament and said that he has evidence Russia is massing tens of thousands of soldiers in the east now, ready for that new offensive. And he's cried out for the weapons that his forces need to defend against that. So there is a new refugee relief effort to evacuate people and to look after them in other cities, and there's also an increasing urgency to bolster the Ukrainian defences to resist that new Russian offensive from the east. Russian military tactics have changed. They've consolidated in the east. There's a new command structure, and the strategy seems to be to try to connect now the forces in the eastern regions of Luhansk and Donetsk with those that have been coming forward from the south, from Crimea, which Russia's held since 2014, to finally secure this land bridge between Crimea and the east so that Russia can consolidate its military units and then perhaps move further into Ukraine and perhaps even approach Kyiv from the other direction now. That's why President Zelensky wants people to keep on alert. And even in cities like Lviv, which have been calm for many days now, there was an air raid warning in the early hours of this morning. So people, even far away from the fighting, are aware that the conflict isn't over, and they're being warned it could get much worse in the days ahead.
And in terms of Ukraine's economy shrinking, according to the World Bank, I mean, it's not really a surprise, is it?
Not at all, no. Normal life has been interrupted right across the country. Business isn't possible in many places with so many people displaced, and with things like the ports on the Black Sea being completely blockaded. It's difficult to transport goods around, to export produce. So Ukraine's economy has already almost ground to a standstill, and the expectation is that the impact of that, even without the fighting, would be intense for months, perhaps years to come. So it's not just military aid and financial support that Ukraine needs. Its people are going to have to be looked after for a long time into the future, and I think that's what we should be braced for now. That is the sort of support that President Zelensky and his people are going to need. But his priority for the immediate days and weeks ahead is the conflict in the east and the expectation that things are going to get worse there with even more loss of life. And at the same time, the sorts of things that have happened under Russian occupation in the villages around Kyiv are being exposed daily. The body count now in that area stands at over 1,200 people, civilians, who the Ukrainians say were deliberately targeted under the Russian occupation.
Dan, thank you very much. Dan Johnson reporting from Lviv in the west of the country.